In this video we're going to show you some different techniques to take some of the parts that we generated in one of the companion videos by editing an existing piece of clip art and look at the ways that we can put them together to make some different arrangements. So in the course of the video we'll go through all the different examples you can see here. So first we'll work through the rosette. Next we'll look at these two appliques at the top and bottom on the right. Then we'll look at laying out this square tile, and finally we'll look at making repeating patterns, archways and borders. Lots and lots of different techniques are going to be covered within this video, really to show you some of the key tools that we use when laying out and creating Flourish assemblies. So let's begin by opening a new copy of Aspire. So let's start by clicking on the icon to create a new file. And we'll set up a job which is 12 inches by 12 inches, 3/4 of an inch thick, an XY datum in the center, and modeling resolution set to very high, and hit the OK button. Now if we come down to the clip art tab, what I want to do is add a folder to my clip art library. Now the folder I'm going to add is a set of files that were actually created in a companion tutorial to this one, where we showed you some of the techniques we use if we're taking an existing piece of clip art and dividing that up into smaller, more usable pieces to assemble for other layouts. So let's go ahead and click on the button to add folder, and on my PC I'm going to find the folder where these files are kept. So I'm going to go to C and just navigate myself down through, and these will be in the project folder for this particular example. So I'm going to come down into that project folder, and in there is a folder called Flourish 118_bits, and I'm going to hit OK. And there we can see the selection of parts that we showed you some of the techniques we used to create in the companion tutorial. Now adding this folder will just make it that much easier to access our clip art for this example. I'm going to start by creating a rosette design, and I'd like that to be based roughly on a repeat of the same object going round my part 6 times. So I'm going to create some geometry to help me specify that area. So let's come down to the drawing tab. I'm going to click on the draw polyline. I'm going to snap to the center, and then I'm going to come up and let the software find the 60-degree snap point. So you can see that snap there, 60 degrees, and the line is 6 inches long. Line length doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to click there, then right mouse click to accept that. So now if we mirror that across the center of the job, and I can either use the mirror icon, so I can say flip about job center, create a mirrored copy, flip horizontal, or a shortcut key that you're going to see me use a lot in this demonstration to do that would be Control-Shift-H, and that would make a horizontal copy across the center of the job. We'll talk more about that shortcut combination later. So now I've got 2 lines, and these have created a 60-degree wedge. Now I know 360 degrees divided by 6 equals 60, so this wedge is effectively 1/6 of a circle. So if I use this as a guide for positioning my object, I should make it easy for me to create something that I can repeat around here 6 times. So let's go back to the clip art tab, and I'm going to double click on the leaf component in here. It's the first one I'm going to work with, and if we go to the modeling tab, I'm just going to rotate that 180 degrees and hit close, and I'm just going to click on that and drag it up. And what I want to do is try and find a kind of a line that we're going to be able to split this along in order to mirror it across the center here to create the part that I'm going to repeat around. So maybe let's just increase the size of this a little, just drag it over there. And I think I want to just turn this round a little bit more, so I'm going to click here and just rotate that round bit more, and then just position that in the center. So what I'm looking for is sort of an imaginary line up the middle. If I want to help myself, then I may want to actually draw that line in, or use the guidelines as well. So if I click here and come up, we can draw that line in, and I can see where this is going to be split if we divide that at the moment. Now I may just rotate that round a little more and get that into the point there, just jog it down. And so I've sort of got that line up to around here. Now If you're trying to set this up yourself, you could rotate the leaf 180 degrees after you've imported it and then rotate it about another 18 degrees. But here I'm just doing it by eye, and so we should get something that roughly looks like I've got on the screen here. Next, I want to crop out the area of the leaf that we're going to be able to mirror and array around this part in order to create our rosette. So let's just select the objects we've got at the top here and click on the zoom selected icon. Next, I'm going to select these two lines and I'm going to click on the icon here to close them by moving their endpoints. Now their endpoints are already in the same place, so that'll just join them together. Then with the same vector, I'm going to click on the icon to close with a straight line, and now I've got a closed triangle. We're going to use that as our cookie cutter shape. Now because of the fact I'm working in a spire, and we represent the model in a spire with little squares, little pixels, there's a chance when I cut it and mirror it that I may end up with a small gap. So what I like to do is slightly oversize the area that I'm going to crop out. Now this can be by a very small amount, so what I'm going to do in this case is take my triangle here and we'll just offset these vectors by a distance of 0.02 of an inch. So I'm going to say offset and close, and you can see that that's selected there because I had that option chosen to select new. Now let's just hit F to fit, and with that vector selected I'm going to click and select the leaf, go to the modeling tab, and click on the icon here to clear area of selected component outside that vector. So if I just zoom in now on my selected object and then zoom in even further, you can see by offsetting that line it's just created a bit of an overlap for me, so hopefully now I'm going to avoid getting any gaps in the model. I'm actually at this point going to delete my offset triangle. Let's hit F to fit, and in fact let's tile the windows so we can see what we've actually ended up with there. So we've just taken a piece out of the leaf. Hopefully it's clear what we were working with from the grayscale. I apologise for not opening the 3D view earlier. Now we can take this and we can mirror it around the centre of our part. I mentioned before we can use the mirror icon to do that, flip horizontal, or if we want to use the shortcut without going into the mirror command, we can select the object, and to make a copy we hold down Control. To mirror around the centre of the job we hold down Shift, and then for a horizontal mirror, which is what we want in this case, we press the H key, and that's the shortcut in order to do that horizontal mirror about the centre of the part and create a copy. So each key in that combination is doing something different. Now if we zoom in, you can see I've got something a little bit odd in the centre. I didn't want a gap, but what I've got is a group of kind of lifted up pixels, and that's because in the overlap area these two components are currently set to add. So if I select my two models, right mouse click and change the combine mode to merge, we should see that disappear and I end up with a much kind of cleaner seam in there. Now if we wanted to blend that seam a little, we can always go up, use the sculpting tools, and of course it would help if we select the appropriate components. So I'm just going to hold the shift key down and grab each of those, go to the sculpting tools. Software will tell me it needs to bake those, and then I could just come in and give that a gentle smooth in the center there, just to blend that together a little. Be careful not to go over the edges or the outside edges, because that'll start to blend them down. These areas here, definitely don't want to blend those down until we've mirrored it around. Now we can hit OK. Now at this point I've got 1/6 of my model done, so let's just zoom out a little in the 3D, select this, and to create the rest we should just be able to use the array tool. Now I'm just going to rename this, we'll just call that leaf segment. Now select this, go into the circular array of copies. My rotation center is going to be 0, 0, and you can see that's moved, the two little circles have moved to the center of the job. I want 6 copies. I want to rotate the copies, and I want a total angle of 360 degrees for my 6 copies. Another way of doing it would be to do 6 copies with a step angle of 60 as well. So either way would give me the same result. I'm going to hit copy, and there we can see we've created our rosette design that's repeated around in order to generate the part you can see in the 2D and 3D view. Now, as we did before, we could go in with the sculpting tools, or maybe we'd just like to give it a more general smooth over the whole part. To do this, we will need to bake it together, so I may as well do that ahead of time. Click on bake, get that into a single component, and then we could use the smoothing filter and just apply a gentle smooth to the whole thing and hit OK. So that part looks quite nice, but I think maybe the center needs finishing off, and there's a couple of ways we could approach that. One is to go and grab another piece of clip art, so maybe to double click the flower here and bring that in. Now we can see that is currently being added, so we'd want to set the combine mode to merge. Now we've lost it, it's too low within the part there, so the next thing we'd need to do is go to the properties and we'll reduce the height but then add a bit of a base height onto this. So let's start with 0.1, it's not enough, go to 0.2, or we could just use the slider here and let it update, and essentially we just want to keep going until we can see our flower sticking out from the center there. So that's one option we've got for finishing the part off in the middle there. The other is we could go ahead and we could draw a circle, create a dome, a raised pyramid type shape, a star, something like that. So lots of other ways that we might approach finishing this part off. So that's the end of our first example here. So this was just a simple rosette. Again, we could extrude a border around this, put it onto a larger dome or a concave surface in order to create kind of a roundel for a piece of furniture or something like that. Really the main technique to take from this is this idea of creating the segment that represents the area you're going to repeat, thinking about any parts that you could mirror, and then also slightly oversizing shapes that you're going to use for cropping to make sure that you've got some component that overlaps and doesn't create a little pixel gap for you when you start to make the copies or you start to use the array tool. Let's go ahead and save this. Go to File, Save As, and in the project folder I'm just going to call this one Rosette Demo and hit enter. Next we're going to do an assembly of this clip art in order to create kind of an applique, so perhaps something that might go on the front of a long rectangular part of a mantle. Just click on the icon to create a new file. I'm not going to worry too much about the exact size of this at the moment, but more about the proportion. So I'm going to set the width to be 12 and the height to be 2. As I say, create a long rectangular piece. We'll leave the datum in the center, all the other parameters the same, and hit OK. Now what I want is a centerpiece here. So we looked at in some of the other videos about how these flourishes often have a focus in the center and then may have cascading shapes coming out of it on the left and right. So I'll come down to the clip art, and the obvious centerpiece I've got out of the objects here is the flower. Now we could either use the original flower or the edit that we made, so maybe we'll start with the flower edit in this case, and then we'll go to the modeling tab and we'll just reduce the height of that down so that maybe it's around 1.75 inches and hit apply and close. So we can see both the 2D and 3D view. Let's just tile the windows horizontally. Next we're going to come back to the clip art, and for this first applique we'll come back to the trusty leaf that we worked with before. So again I'm just going to double click that to bring it into the center. I'm going to size that down, so maybe we'll make the width of that 1.75 and apply and close, and then I want to rotate that 90 degrees, which I can do using the rotation tool, or a handy shortcut key on the keyboard is number 9. If I press that, it does a 45-degree rotation. Now we can see at the moment that this is being added on, so let's come in to our components, right mouse click and set them all to merge, and then I'm going to take that leaf and I'm going to hold the shift key down and click and drag out to the left here. And what I want to do is just position that in a way that it appears to sort of be coming out from the flower and creating the first part of our design. Now it doesn't matter whether I work on the left and the right or the right, because I'll be able to mirror this afterwards. So next what I want to do is just take a copy of this and click, hold Shift and Control and drag it out. Now we could make a whole bunch of repeats the same size, but as I said, what I want to do is create this kind of cascading effect. So I'm going to let go of that, and then I'm going to set the selected object size. I'm going to keep link XY checked, and I'm going to set in here a size of 75% and hit apply. And then I'm just going to hold the Shift key down and just drag that again so it appears to just be continuing out from the leaf next to it, and you can see we're starting to get this flow here. Again, I can select that now, Shift and Control, drag it out a little bit further, and again I'm going to set my size to be 75%, close that now, click and just drag that over and eyeball that into position there. And so very quickly and easily we've just created something which is essentially cascading down by equal amounts, and there's a type of symmetry to this where something is constantly reduced by the same proportion. Now the only thing you have to be aware of here is that the height will reduce as we bring the size down, so you will start to potentially look like that this is sort of losing definition really. There's a couple of ways we can deal with that. And the easiest thing is just to adjust the height. So if we look at our first leaf, if we select that, go to the properties, we can see it's around 0.16 of an inch. Maybe we'll just make that a more easily remembered value, 0.15. Now if we grab this one, you can see it's shrunk down, but I could set that to be 0.15 as well. And I could take this one and also make that 0.15 too. So now they've all got the same thickness. In this case we've been quite lucky because they overlap nicely, but if you found that these were starting to appear in front of the one next to it, then you can use the tilt or the fade to adjust that accordingly. Now we could select these objects, so holding the Shift key down I'm just going to click all three of those, and we can use the mirror command, or we could use the shortcut key. In this case we'll use the mirror command, flip about job center, create a mirrored copy, flip horizontal, and so there we've just created ourselves a nice little applique that we could now machine, cut out and apply onto something in order to create some decoration. And obviously we can scale this up and down. We could also save this as a new piece of clip art as well within our clip art folder. So just to show you how we would do that, I would take all the objects in there and I would group them together, so group selected objects. We might give that a new name, so I might call it applique 12x2, and that just gives me a sense of its proportions, which is quite a handy thing to have in the name. Then I could right mouse click and export as 3D clip art. And if we put that into the same folder as our other 3D clip files and hit save, then we should see that appear in the same folder here. We may just need to click out and back into it to have it refresh, but now you can see that piece of clip art, and we've added that in order to our collection of things that we can access in future, and just made it that little bit easier to maybe take that, ungroup it and start to make changes to it. In addition to saving the 3D clip file, let's also make sure we save the Aspire project. Go to File, Save As, and in the project folder let's call this one Applique 1 Demo. Hit Save. Next I'm going to set up a new project, so we'll go File, New, and this one I'm going to make 12 inches by 4 inches, datum in the center again, and hit OK. Now in this case I'd like to create an applique that would go on the front of sort of a valance or an apron type shape. So again I'm just going to draw the outline of that to help me. I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle, and I'm just going to snap from corner to corner in my part, right mouse click and accept that. Next we'll come over and create an ellipse. So we'll snap to the midpoint of the bottom of our rectangle, drag the ellipse out, and I'm going to make this width of 10 and a height of 3 and hit apply and close. Now we'll just take the scissors and trim off the bottom of our ellipse and the bottom of our rectangle. So this sort of represents this apron shape. What I want to do is just put something into this which is going to again have kind of a center motif and then just sort of follow this curvature down. So similar to the one before, but this time we're going to do more of a sort of freeform layout. So let's go back to the clip art tab. And this time I think we'll start with the original flower, so I'm going to double click to load that in. Again, go to the modeling tab and just resize that, so we'll set the selected object size and we'll just give that a height of 2 and apply and close. And maybe what I want to do is just position that in the center of this distance here. Now I can either measure that or I could draw a line to help me with that, so I can snap from there to there. And then I could select that, select the line and use the alignment tools to align that vertically. So different times you may want to create yourself some vectors just to use for the purposes of alignment or construction. So now we're done with that, we'll hit delete. Next we can bring in some of the other pieces of clip art we want to use. So we'll come down to clip art. I'm going to drag in this model single stalk. Now you can see that looks relatively big compared to the flower now. If you remember, we scaled the flower down to keep everything in proportion, because originally this was a nice proportionate design. We probably want to scale all the other objects we bring in down by roughly the same amount. Now we could eyeball it and just do it so that it looks right, or we could have a quick look here. If we drag the original flower back in and we look at the size of that, we can see that it was 2.639, and if we click on it we scaled it down to a height of 2. So if we look at this and scale that down to a height of 2, we can see the percentage there, 78.5. So what that allows us to do, if we delete that, when we bring in the objects, is just scale them down by that same amount. If we just put in 78.5, I know that's going to keep that in proportion. So I'm going to click on this. Let's actually go, so we tile the windows, we can see the 2D and the 3D view. In fact, if we wanted to, we could work in the 3D view as well, but we need to make sure we sort of keep an eye on the layout here. And I want to rotate that around again. Now we could use the rotate handle, or again we could hit 9 on the keyboard if we make sure we've got focus on the 2D view. Hit 9 twice, that'll rotate that around 90 degrees. We could always use the rotate tool as well there. So let's position that first one there. Now that is currently set to add, so let's come down to the modeling tab, select both of these, right mouse click and change their combine mode to merge. So that one looks okay. So I'm going to make a copy of this now. I'm going to select it, hold shift and control and drag, and then I'm just going to hit V on the keyboard in order to mirror that vertically, and H on the keyboard to mirror it horizontally. What I want to do is sort of put that into a position here where those two are going to appear to be sort of mirror images of each other. But I think I'd actually like to rotate that round a little bit more to get that as I want it to look. So let's just delete this, select this again, and you'll find this process is very iterative. You'll often have to delete something and then come back in and create a new version of it. So that looks okay. Again, if we take that now, let's just jog that up and over a little bit with the arrow keys, shift and control to copy that across, and then H and V on the keyboard to mirror it, and then I'm just going to position that here. So doing a mirror like this and positioning it in a sort of in an opposite way creates this nice symmetry. They're the same size parts, we've got the symmetry of these leaves and kind of the flow of this going around. Next, let's continue this by adding a couple of other pieces of clip art in. Let's come over and we'll select the single stalk 2. So I'm just going to click and drag that in. Again, we might want to scale that down to keep things roughly in proportion. If we just make it, say 80%, that's going to be close enough. Hit close, select that, use the rotate handle. Just going to rotate that around, sort of get that so that it roughly blends into position there. I'm not going to worry too much about the join at the moment. Do want to change the combine mode of that to merge. So that looks okay. We'll sort out how that blends together in a moment. So that sort of continues the curvature round, and now I want to add in a leaf that's going to sort of cascade down from that and fill in this area here, provide us with the balance we're looking for. So back to the clip art, the leaf we were working with earlier, let's just drag that in. Again, we can scale that down, make that 80%, apply and close, click on it, use the rotate handle, and we can just put that into position. And what we want that to do is effectively come in and sort of blend in to this shape here. Now if we look at that, that's going to be a bit tricky because this is sort of going to get in its way, and sometimes what you'll find is if you just mirror something, it'll actually give you the flow or direction you're looking for. So let's go ahead and hit V on the keyboard to mirror this vertically, rotate it up this way, and now you can see that we can put that into place so that it's effectively looks like that's joining in and coming from the same stem there, and then just blending down here. So let's just move that down a little bit further and over, and then we could also stretch this across and down a bit too if we want there. We want to twist that up so we can get it following the curvature down the bottom here a little bit better, and then that may just require us to move all the other objects in here and change their position as well. So you're going to go back and continually keep editing, moving, trying different things, trying new shapes and fitting them into your job to see what's going to work best. Now the leaf we need to right mouse click on, change its combine mode to merge as well. And really you can continue to work with the objects you've got in this situation for as long as you want, or until you're completely content with the way that it looks. For instance, in this case I can see the leaf is getting quite close to what's going to be this kind of curved shape here, and we have a bit more space here. So I may want to take that and actually go in and use something like the Distort Selected Objects tool, go to the bounding box option there, change this top bit to a Bezier curve and just stretch that up, and that's going to start to adjust the angle of the stalk, and then we can use the other points here in order to raise that up and get that to flow around that curve a little bit more again, and just drag that across there. So that looks a little bit better now. I can bake the distortion there, it'll tell me it needs to be the component's going to be baked. And so the last thing really is to just blend together some of the shapes we've got here so they appear to flow into each other. So we might take this and go in and use the sculpting tools. Again, it'll tell me it's going to bake those, which is fine. And let's just maximize that and zoom in using the mouse and the control key, and then we'll just smooth that gently into there. So we just don't see any sort of identifiable seams. We can hit keep and OK, and we could do the same with the leaf and that object as well if we wanted to. So again, let's just look down the Z-axis there, zoom in on that place. Maybe that I'm just going to jog the leaf over a smidge in the 3D view, double click that. Again, the software will warn us we need to bake those, and we can just come in now and smooth that blend out. So once again, we might want to save this as a 3D clip file, or at least that little assembly we've created there. But essentially there, what we've looked at is just a different example of how we might fill an area with these components. And as I say, this is totally iterative process and very subjective, so we could keep changing and adjusting these. In this situation, to finish this off, we could select those components, Control Shift and H to mirror them around the center, and there's our finished applique again that we could cut out and apply to fit onto this shape that we sketched here. Save that file now, and we'll just call that applique 2 demo, and so that's in the project folder as well. For the next example, we're going to combine some of the different elements that we've looked at in the applique examples and also in the rosette. We're going to use these in order to create a square design and effectively something that could be tiled, and we are going to show you a way that we're going to tile within it in order to create all the components we need. So let's start by creating a new file. I'm going to set up a job which is 12 by 12. We'll keep all the other parameters the same. And what I want to do to start with is just drag in what's going to be the centerpiece. So let's just double click our standard flower shape there. And then I'm going to go to the drawing tab, and what I'm going to do is just sketch one triangle of area that I want to fill with components. So I'm going to draw a polyline, I'm going to click in the center, click to make sure we snap to the corner, click over into snap in the center, and then click back down and snap to the end point there. So I've drawn a triangle that represents the area that I want to fill with components. So this would very much follow the same process as we just used for the applique, in that we'd need to drag components in and start to see how we could get them to fit within our design. So it may well be that we'd start with a single stalk here and just drag that into this job, just rotate this around, position that here so that we start the kind of flow of something coming out there. Next we might bring in this file here and just click and sort of position that in place there, and I'm quite happy to do this in the 2D view to begin with, because really I'm just looking to get the right flow and positioning of these things, and then we'll worry about how they relate to each other in the 3D afterwards. So we'd continue to adjust these and position them where we wanted them to be, and as you saw with the applique layout, it's a very iterative process, so we keep adding new things onto the design, bringing other pieces in, putting those into position, and just trying out different things with regard to how we might fill our shape. Sometimes it's very obvious. I mean, in this case it's going to take a little bit of work because of the pieces we've got here in order to make sure I can sort of sensibly fill areas. Sometimes we may want to take an object, shift, copy it, just move that around there, stretch it up, and sort of look at how we might start to position other objects in here to fill different spaces. And we just continue importing parts, tweaking them, moving them around, and just working in the 2D view until we had essentially filled this triangular area. Now, I'm not going to continue to do that here because it would get a little bit dull just watching me continually dragging and tweaking and dragging and tweaking. But I have a file where I've already got an arrangement, so you can see that. So I'm going to select from the project folder Tile Unedited and hit Open. I'm not going to save the folders there, and there you can see how we've laid out the shapes. So if we tile the windows so we can see the 2D view and the 3D view, you can see what I haven't worried about so far is trying to edit these and cut off the overlapping areas. So I've just positioned them so that the general flow and spacing looks good. I can see I may want to just twist this around a little bit, so if I just grab everything and select that again, and we'll just zoom in, just rotate that, maybe jog it up a bit. I'm trying to keep that away from the edge. Let's just hit F to fit. I can see at the very top there that's got a little bit too long, so we can just stretch that down, stretch that across, and say you're really just looking to fill this triangular area. Now the next thing is to worry about editing any of the areas that are overlapping where they're not supposed to be. So we'll use the sculpting tools for that. Let's just maximize the 3D view and zoom in up the top here, and we want to remove just the ends of some of the components like this that are sticking out. So let's start at the top, select that, go to the sculpting tools, and if you make sure the show grayscale background is switched on, that will really help you to see what you need to take out. Then we can just go to the undo brush, hold the shift key down, and just delete the edges there and hit OK, and then just check that that looks correct. This one's a little bit more tricky because it's quite close to the edge there, so we'll select that and go to the undo brush again, just remove some of that, maybe not all the way to there, to the end and then just go in and just smooth it down, and that'll just help to reduce the height in that area. Hit OK and we can see that looks alright. This piece here, again, sticking out the side, so in actual fact I'm going to take both these pieces because we'll just blend that together as well. So we'll go into the sculpting, it'll tell me it's going to bake those, which is fine. I can remove that piece there again with the undo and the shift, and then we can go to the smooth and just blend those shapes in there. Hit OK. Haven't quite taken enough of that off, so we can just go back in, back to the undo, back to the shift, and just click to remove a bit more. Finally, this piece here, same type of operation with the undo and just taking the end off and hitting OK. Now we could also adjust things like the fade and tilt and things like that. So perhaps we'd take this object here, if I click it again in the 3D view and then click on the dot at the bottom, I can get the properties for this. So maybe we'd increase the height a little, 0.15, and maybe we'd also tilt that. If we just go set, go bottom to top there, just add 1 degree, and you can see that's just filling that in a little bit better there now. So really it's just a case of as much time as I want to spend adjusting these different areas and editing them until I like the way it looks. So we're almost ready now. There's one more part here. I can see if I zoom in, you can see that we've got a little bit of this sticking through there. So what I might do is just select all 3 of those components, go to the sculpting, it'll bake them together. I can see there's a little dot there, we'll just smooth that out, and then we'll go to the undo brush, hold down the shift key, and again just take the edge off that and just smooth the end there and hit OK. So that looks good. Now I'm ready to start making my copies in order to fill in my square and make something that would effectively act as something that I can make into a repeating tile. So let's go ahead and look at both windows, 2D view on the left, 3D view on the right. What I want to do is select all my components using the shift key apart from the flower, and then I'm going to group those together. So that'll make it into a single entity. Now I'm going to take that object and I'm going to mirror it about the center of the part. So the shortcut key Control-Shift-H will allow me to do that. So there's my first copy, and that's created effectively a quarter of my design. And now I could either mirror that and rotate it, or we can use the array function and make 4 copies of that around the center of the job. So rotation center X0, Y0, 4 copies, 360 degrees total angle, and hit copy. The software will just take a few seconds to do this, and then once that's complete you'll see a really impressive indication of just how well it works once we start to mirror, repeat and array components. So again, the main thing to get here is the fact that I've just isolated 1/8 in effect of the pattern that I want to create. I've laid out some components and adjusted those accordingly, and then when we mirror them and array them, we really get a massive amount of effect for the work that we've put in on that first set that we've created there. And now we could also take this, group it again, and make multiple tiles of it in order to cover an even larger area. So that's a way that you can fill a square design. You can combine this with the technique we showed in the rosette as well, where you could bring in a component and you could crop it into this area and stretch it so that it fills that, and then do the same mirroring and arraying again as well in order to completely fill the shape to make a square kind of rosette in effect. So let's save this. We'll say File, Save As, and we'll call this tile square demo, and hit save. So you can find that in the project folder. Now for a final example, we're going to look at how we can create repeat shape molding, arches and frames. So let's go and create a new file here. going to set this up to be 14 inches by 4 inches and keep everything else the same as we've been working on throughout this video. Hit OK. Come down to the Clip Art tab and I'm going to double click on the leaf. Now let's come over to the Modelling tab. We'll set our component Combine mode to be Merge. We'll tile the windows so we can see the 2D view and the 3D view. Let's just click on the 2D view there and zoom out a little bit. And then I'm going to rotate this around. So we're going to come all the way around so the stalk is at the bottom. And we're going to make that so that it's more or less horizontal. So you can see this kind of sticking out horizontally now. And the idea is that we're going to, if we just hit F9 to center that, and I hold Shift and Control down, is we're going to make copies of this so that it kind of overlaps and repeats. So that if we just swap that around there, we'll get this kind of an effect. What I'd like to do though is make sure in the way that I lay this out is nice and symmetrical. So rather than just drag and approximate it, I'm going to select this object, click it again. Remember we centered it, so F9 on the keyboard. I'm going to hold Shift down and just drag it over here. And what I want to do is create a small gap in the middle between this leaf and the center there. So I may need to zoom in just to jog that over a little bit more. Let's hit F to fit. Now there's two ways that I can mirror this and create the opposite on the other side. We can do a horizontal mirror, then a vertical mirror, both about the center of the part, or we can rotate it. And I'll show you both methods, one on this and then another when we create the second copy. So with the object selected, I'm going to hold down Control to make a copy, Shift to mirror about the center, and H to mirror horizontally. Then with that new object, the copy selected, I don't want to make another copy this time. I'm just going to hold down Shift to mirror about the center and V to do it vertically. And then you can see how that overlap is going to look between those parts. So that looks good. Now to create the next copy, we're going to do a similar exercise. Select both of these. I'm going to group them together, and then I'm going to click and hold Shift down and drag this over again here. So what I want to do this time is again get this leaf so it's very close to the center, but just has a bit of a space there. And we could do the same operation in terms of mirroring it over and then mirroring it vertically, but we can achieve the same thing by rotating a copy around the center. We can do that with the circular array function. So if we enter this rotation point as being 0, 0, the center of the job, 2 items, total angle of 360, and hit copy, then we're basically going to create something very similar. Now I can see I've got a little bit too much of a gap there. I would like these parts to overlap. So what I'm going to do is just delete that, click on this again, click on it and just jog it over with the arrow keys a couple of times and then hit copy again and see what that gives us. So that looks nice. We've got these stalks overlapping with each other. We've got this kind of nice flowing pattern that we've created between these leaves. And this in effect is going to act now as sort of a single piece that we can repeat and make copies of in order to make a long straight moulding if we wanted to. To create a repeating section, I need to know what the appropriate distance is to enter into the array tool. The way that we find that out with a design like this, where we've been mirroring or rotating about the center, is to take one of our tiles, in effect, or one of the repeating pieces like this, and find its distance from the center point. A quick way to do that is to draw a vertical line, just snapping that in place. Select the object and use the Align tool to align the line to the center of the component. Now if we take that line and go to the Move option, it'll tell us its absolute position, and that is an X position of 2.4955, and I can copy that value to the clipboard. Now if we zoom out a bit, we know that that distance is going to give us the appropriate repeat. So if we go to the Array tool, I might make 1 row, 3 columns in X, and then enter an offset of that value times 4, because that's just giving me the distance for effectively a quarter of this. So if we hit equals, that's the magic number that's going to appropriately repeat this. If I go ahead and hit copy, we can see that is the case from the grayscales in the 2D view. Let me just undo that for a second, and maybe we'll just make one copy. So we'll enter 2 and hit copy there. And if we want to go in the negative direction, we could go back to selecting these two objects, and we could enter a negative offset value in there and hit copy there. So you can see we can go in either direction, and this is the way we'd go about creating a nice repeating section. So let's grab those components now. We'll actually just delete the line there. We'll grab these components, and let's just set the selected object size and maybe just make the height of those 1.5 inches and hit the spacebar, hit apply. So there's a nice repeating section, and we've looked at the steps we'd need to go through to create that. Next, I want to show how we could take something like this and turn it into an arch or a frame. So let's make our part a little bit bigger. I'm going to go to set job dimensions, and we're going to go up to a size of 14 by 14 and hit OK. And then just going to take those components there, and we'll just move those to an absolute position, the corner there of y negative 5.75. So that's just 1/4 of an inch from the lower border. So I haven't gone down far enough there. Sorry, that's 14 inches, isn't it? So we need to put that down to 6.75 rather than 5.75. That's better. Apologies for that. So we've got a section there which we're going to use in a minute to start creating our frame. But before we do that, let's have a quick look at how we turn something like this into an arch. So let's draw a circle. We're going to click on the circle icon, snap in the center, drag this out and enter a diameter of 12 inches, hit apply and close. Then I'm just going to select that, go into node editing mode and delete the two bottom spans by hitting the D key on the keyboard. Now there are two ways we can extrude our components along here. We can take a single set of components like this and extrude them along with multiple components and an overlap, or we could group everything together as a single component if I knew I wanted exactly this number, and then we could extrude that along there. So let's show you that method first quickly. We'll take these, let's group them together. So we'll click on the icon there to group them, and we've got a single component, or at least the software will consider it a single component. Now we can select our path, click on the extrude option, use selection, might want to right mouse click and reverse the rail. I'm going to use a component which is our single group, and I'm going to stretch to drive rail length, and we'll just set that to merge, call that arch 1 and hit apply. So what that's going to do is take the exact number I've got there, starting and ending with the first and last, and just extrude those around that shape. So I get a very regular selection along there when we do that. Now an alternative is just to fill it with an individual set. So if I was to go ahead and hit reset and close on that, and we ungroup these again, we could take our arch, go back into the extrude, use selection, and this time I would select just a single group. There's a whole bunch of the groups there. That's just a pair of these leaves, fill with multiple copies, and we can set an overlap in there. So maybe we'll start with 0 and hit apply and see what that does. So there's each individual set, and there's what looks like a gap between them because it's going from stem to stem with 0 overlap. If we increase that to say 20% and hit apply, then it's going to start to overlap those pieces, and we get a flat end here and a flat end there, and it just fills it with as many as it can. So two different ways we can use a repeating pattern like this to create an arch shape, or to get it to follow a curve. It doesn't have to be an arch, it could be an arbitrary line that we're extruding these along. So I'm going to go ahead and hit close there. We'll keep a copy of that, we'll put it onto a new level, just move it off there and undraw the level and reselect level 1 so that that's current. I'm also going to take our arch vector, move that onto a different layer that we'll call arch, and make it invisible and inactive. We'll just have that there so that it's saved in the file when we actually save a copy of this. This is probably a good time to make a save copy, so we'll go to File, Save As, and we'll call this one Moulding Arch Frame Demo. And we'll go ahead and save that again when we've completed our last part of this, which is to show you how we might take a section of this and create repeated copies around to build a frame. Now to do this, I could either take the section that we've got here and we could just copy that around and maybe put corner blocks on it. But I want to look at this if I can take just this pattern and maybe mitre it in the corners and repeat it up the side there and also mirror it about the centre. So maybe we'll get rid of these right hand copies, delete those and just select the objects we've got here. You Control Shift and H to create a horizontal copy and see what that looks like at the join. And that actually looks pretty good. We've got away quite well there with a nice looking blended shape. If that didn't look so good, we might have to consider modelling a tie in there or some kind of fill-in shape or adjusting the leaf as it came into the centre there. But I like that. I'm going to go with that. That looks pretty good. So we'll just delete the copies we made again there. So we'll come back to this section here. Let's just maximise the 2D view and hit F to fit. What I want to do is create the line in here that will effectively give me my mitre line. So we'll go to the Drawing tab, click on Draw Polyline, snap into the corner and then snap into the centre. So that's the line that we're going to cut through. Now where those leaves are at the moment, that's going to give me not a very nice place to cut that and mirror it across. What I really want is to kind of probably go through the middle of the meat of the leaf. So we may want to take this set of vectors, click on it again and just move that across there so that I can see where that line is going to cut through. I'll just extend that out a little bit there. So that looks quite good. We can always come back and adjust that if we want. Now, as I've done earlier, I want to create a bit of an overlap here. So I don't want to cut it exactly along that vector. I want to move the vector over to create an overlap of pixels so I don't end up with a gap when we create the mirrored copy for this. So I'm going to take the vector that we've got there and I'm going to hit copy and then I'm just going to zoom in, and with that vector selected I'm going to hold Shift and Control and just jog out a copy, just a very small amount to the left there. Next I'm going to take my component, select that vector, go to the Modelling tab and click on Split. It'll tell me it needs to bake it, which is fine. And there you can see it split my component. And in actual fact I've lost a little bit of the part on this side of the line here. So I'm just going to hit Control Z straight away, take my line there and just move that out even a little bit further. And then I'm going to reselect the component, reselect the line, go back to the split command, and now I can see I've got that overlap of pixels I'm looking for. So if we zoom out and take a look, I can delete this piece here. I should be able to delete my second line there. Now if we tile the windows so we can see what's going on, I'm going to select these objects here, I'm going to shift and select the line, we're going to go to the mirror command, and this time I don't want to flip about the job center. I do want to create a mirrored copy, but I want to say flip about line, and the line should be the last thing I've selected there. Now we can see where we split that, what kind of effect we're going to get. I think that looks nice. I could play around with that if it wasn't quite right, but at this point we've actually got enough components where we may want to group that together. So there's a single quarter of our frame, and again what we can do now is just mirror that, Control Shift H, select this again, Control Shift V, so mirroring those about the center. If we back off and look at that, we can see the frame we've created there. And as I mentioned before, any of the relationships between the leaves, the overlaps and the way they join could have been altered at any stage, but you can see once you get those positions right how quickly you can just take this and repeat it in order to create multiple copies and fill in a full frame. So let's go ahead and save this file now. So that's called Moulding Arch Frame Demo. We'll find that in the project folder if you want to look at it. And now I'm just going to go ahead and summarize what we've looked at in this video. So lots of different techniques we've worked through. We started by setting up a job where we could create a segment of a rosette. We cropped a component and then repeated that around in order to create the complete piece there, using a combination of the mirror and the rotational array tool. Then we showed you a couple of different applique examples, just showing you how you might bring in bits of clip art, adjust them, their spacing, their size, in order to fill different shapes. Finally, with those on the overlapping areas, we needed to go in and maybe trim some areas out using the sculpting tools, or we could have used a cropping command as well, and then finally smoothing and blending them together. Next, we looked at an example where we laid out components to fit within one triangle, so effectively an eighth of a square, and then we showed how we could mirror and array those in order to fill the complete square and create a tile. And then lastly here we've showed you how we can take an object, some ways that we can rotate about the center in order to start to create sort of mirrored and opposite shapes, and then how we can calculate distances for repeating them along to create a straight molding, how we can extrude to create arches along curves, and then finally some of the things that we may want to understand if we want to lay out these parts in order to create a frame. And that concludes this video.